I want to welcome those of you who are joining us for this conversation. My name is Roger Green. I'm the rector of St. Timothy's Episcopal Church in Anderson, and have the privilege today of having a conversation with Ashley Hart. Ashley is a member of St. Timothy's. She and Jeff started attending several years ago. 5 years ago, they received into this world the beautiful Cora Lee Hart. And just this last October, Selah Maisie Hart arrived. And the verse from the Bible that really, I think, is the substance and theme of these sessions is a line from Psalm 78, where the people of God say in exasperation, "Can God spread a table in the wilderness? Can God sustain us in the wilderness?" My conversation with Ashley and another member of our congregation in a few weeks are with people who have and are going through very, very challenging times, and just want to hear what they have to say about how they have survived or maybe not survived, and see where this takes us. So, Ashley, wonderful to have you with me in this conversation, and just really want you to tell us a little bit about what the journey has been, and take this wherever you want to take it.
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me. And I'm talking about my very favorite things today, which are my two girls, my family, and, the journey with God in the midst of hardship. It's always been a thing that I've been curious about, because even if you're not going through suffering, even if you're in a time of like harvest and beauty, you still know that it's around, it's never far from you. And so I've always been curious about God and people and suffering. So I'm a social worker, so that might be part of it too. I've always, kind of walked with other people through their suffering. But our journey is that in 2015, we got married. We found each other, Jeff and I, and had been waiting a long time to find each other. And so soon after that, in 2016, we had our daughter, Cora Lee Joy, and we're just so grateful to start at St. Tim's while I was pregnant, and had some really lovely community of a group called Women on the Journey, and just some really lovely sessions that we had at St. Tim's, learning about the prophets and imagination and that kind of thing. And so Cora Lee was born, and I still remember Roger and Alex blessing her, and when we first brought her to church the first time, and just saying what I knew in my heart, which was that she was a beloved child of God. And then we tried for every 28 days for 6 years, which, if you're doing the math, that is 72 months of trying times 28, whatever that is. And we had a miscarriage in between, and then just a lot of trying and not getting pregnant. And so we had kind of honestly given up, and said we were considering embryo adoption. And a friend of ours was reading one of those, what I would consider maybe a cheesy devotional book. And it said to pray for a friend who is struggling with God. And for some reason, I hadn't talked to her in ages, but for some reason she thought she should pray for me, which is funny. I've never really asked her about that. But so she started praying, and God slowed down her prayer and said to her, "You need to pray for her for a baby." And we hadn't really talked about wanting to have a baby with her. So she did. And that is the week that Selah Maisie was conceived. Just the coolest thing. And so at our 20-week ultrasound, it took a little longer than we thought it would. And then it took a while for the doctor to come into our room, which normally is never a good thing. And she talked to us about Selah's condition, which is that she had no amniotic fluid. You learn a lot about medicine as you go through a journey like ours. But apparently, the amniotic fluid that women have when they're pregnant around 20 weeks is all of the baby's urine. So the baby pees and then creates amniotic fluid, and then they swallow it and then they pee. And so she didn't have any, which meant that she wasn't peeing, which meant that her kidneys didn't work. And who knew that kidneys were important?
Mm.
I sure didn't. I thought, you got 2 of them. Turns out they're very important. And so she talked to us about termination and said, like, if the kidneys don't work, there's probably other things that don't work. And she told us where we were going to have to go and talk to us about like politics and whatever. It was not the time for us to be talking about any of those things. We were just there thinking we were going to find out, like, get to see a picture of her. So she referred us to maternal fetal medicine, and they also said, that her kidneys weren't working, and that meant that she wouldn't be able to breathe, because when you drink in the amniotic fluid, that's how your lungs develop. And so they offered us the option of doing amniotic infusions. And so we did 51 amniotic infusions. Selah was just a rock star and was very thirsty, more than they've ever seen before. And so they actually ended up putting me inpatient and doing them every single day. So I had surgery in order for her to get those amniotic infusions. And they expected her to be born on a vent, breathing with a ventilator for a month or so. And she was born on room air. She was just able to breathe on her own and always has been since then. And so she's just a little wonder, and has just continuously surprised the medical community, but she's also continuously had a lot of struggle. And so Selah requires dialysis every single day. Just imagine like all of the fluid that you take in every day, not being able to get it out of your body. And so that is how, and not being able to clean your blood. And so in order for her to clean her blood and get fluid out of her body, she has to have dialysis. And if she doesn't, she goes into respiratory distress. So we've had a couple of times where she's had an infection, or she's had something very dramatic where we have been on the verge of having to say goodbye to her. Once in December, once in January, I think once in February. So we're not that far away from times. And so you might imagine that, it's just kind of been chronic suffering, like chronic uncertainty. And so that has been our journey. So we are with her all the time. So part of our journey is figuring out who is going to hang out with Coralie, who is going to hang out with Selah, and who is going to be traversing in between. So that's kind of our journey in a nutshell. Selah is waiting. Lots of people want to know what's next for her. So we're waiting for her to be big enough to do outpatient dialysis, which we're getting closer and closer. We'll be able to go home. What a sacred word that is. And then eventually, when she gets to a certain weight and height, which is around 2 years old, she can get a kidney transplant. So that is where we are with Selah.
Wow.
And then Coralie is along for the ride, which I'm sure you can imagine, a 5-year-old.
So how, just listening to you, I'm exhausted. And I just keep finding myself saying, oh my gosh. So So what sustained you in all of this? I mean, this is not like a week long. It's not an acute struggle that ends, quickly and you move on. I mean, and you've got chapters ahead. So what's kept you going?
Well, I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers when they had a newborn, but like baseline newborn is exhausting. Like you're just barely functioning. So there have been times when I've been driving and I call Jeff on the way to or from, and I say, you have to keep me awake because I feel like I'm falling out of my body. Like I'm just that tired. So stay off of 71 South is the but love makes you do crazy things. I think that there's no other option. Love makes you do crazy things, like go without sleep and be in a place that you hate being, so I think that the ultimate answer is love. And we have one thing that Jeff and I really appreciated about each other when we were dating is that we were both pretty honest about not kind of pie in the sky perspectives on life or on God, but we've been committed to like an authentic journey in our life. And I think that has paid off. I think that having had that authentic conversation with ourselves and with our community, that from that, like we're experiencing the fruits of that because we're able to, there's some questions we're not asking this time around in our suffering because we've already asked them. We've already like labored through instruction and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and going like, surely I'm going to be reoriented into a new space with God. And so I think that part of it is just having lived long enough and with enough authenticity that you're able to see clearly like that right now our job is to love Selah, and that's our role. And what does that look like today, like and then I think that we've talked about like, I just love the thing that you talked about the setting the table in the wilderness. Like the first time you said that, I was like, just felt like rest in my bones. Because man, when you're in the wilderness, having someone else set up a banquet table sounds pretty awesome.
Right.
Yeah. And so in like very practical things like community, like we have family members who have given up their lives to be supporting us right now. We have lots of friends who are like pouring into so many different aspects, from mowing our grass to picking up our groceries to lots of people want to do our laundry, but that's not necessary. But just like doing everything, sitting with Selah so that we are able to like take a nap or go on a date. Or so I think community is a big piece of how we're surviving.
The image I have is, your phrase that love makes you do crazy things. My first thought was that the bread, the food on the table in this wilderness is this little baby. And this little baby is this bundle of love that is drawing love out of you and others in mammoth proportions. We have two children, and I know what it's like when they arrive and you just think, oh my gosh, you feel so loved.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I just made the connection that all the while you're going through this challenging time for this baby you love so much, it's the baby itself that is giving you so much of what you need.
Mm.
It sounds like, and
Yeah.
and others, and makes others, respond.
Yes. Right now she's in the pediatric intensive care unit, which means they get 0 to 18. And so they are not used to having an itty bitty tiny baby. And so I was on the phone with my mom today and people just kept stopping by. People are just dying for like time with Selah because she, it's a special thing. Like she's a special baby and she's, I think, sharing with all of us some goodness, But also, like, I know with Coralie that just as it was my first time being a mom, I remember being a little bit intimidated and scared of the ferocity of God's love that I felt as a mother. Like, whoa, baby, like, and that's kind of good to have when you're in the wilderness, to know like this is a fierce love that we're carrying around in our bodies for other people.
Wow.
And that can sustain you, I think.
Yeah. So I'm sure you're wise enough to know that your experience is your experience and will not necessarily be anybody else's experience. But one of the things I've learned over the years is that people find strength in listening to other people who are surviving very, very challenging times, that it gives them hope that, well, maybe I can do this. So if you were to dare to pass on a word or two to people who are struggling based upon what you've been through, what would you want them to know?
Well, I'm reminded of, thank you for asking, because that's why I'm here today. I mean, I think first of all, you're just surprised that you can survive what seems unsurvivable. And I think I'm reminded of in the Old Testament, Hagar, when she is encountering just immense hardship, and that she is one of, like, I think the only women, you can theologically correct me there, who gets to name God. And she named God the God who sees. And I think that there's just something like, you need to know that God sees you in the midst of you doing really hard things. And the other thing that I'd say, Barbara Brown Taylor, she talks about learning to live in the dark, and about her own journey of going through suffering with other people. And she says, if you try to keep yourself from really dealing with suffering, you're only living half of a life. You're only getting to be half human, because part of being human is that you're going to suffer. And so I remember when we first got Selah's diagnosis that I said, well, everybody has to encounter suffering, like this is a part of what it means to be here. And so I think just remembering that God sees you, knowing that God sees you and is present with you. And then I guess knowing that you have and finding community, and being okay asking them, because people want to do things with and for you. It's the way we all create meaning of our lives, is that love going back and forth, the God who's in the midst of those spaces. And then another, like, this is just random, but like not random. We've been seeking for years how to build a good life for our family, and especially for Coralie. And we've found that there are ways that you can bring a prop, what I'm calling a prop. Other people smarter than me, a friend of mine, Sarah Vank, calls it a humanity anchor. And that you bring things, we brought a guitar into the ICU. That you bring things into your life, and especially in the midst of suffering, that remind you and everyone around you of the goodness of the Lord. Taste and see that the Lord is good, of the goodness of the life that we've been given. And so, the world's renowned nephrologist picks up her guitar regularly and plays Beatles tunes to her. Just like getting to do things that are normal, quote unquote, is getting to taste and see the goodness of the Lord as you're walking through suffering. So right now, the Hart family is hosting the March Madness bracket. So just doing, continuing to do the goodness that's in life while you're, as much as you can, while you're navigating what feels unsurvivable.
Wow. I'm really struck by your reference to the God who sees. That my immediate reaction was that how comforting it is that when people notice that we're suffering, even if they can't do anything about it, and how comforting it is to know that God sees what is going on, even if we may be having conversations with God about, okay, so you see what's going on.
Yeah.
Could we have a little bit of help here?
Yes, I told my best friend, I was like, yeah, that's all good. Can he get a mop? You pick up a mop and like clean up on aisle 5. Can we get some help here? But yeah, I think just, and I think the message for other people who aren't going through current suffering is like, you're the mop, like that you get to be the one who really sees the person in where they are. And so we have, so many medical professionals, so many people in our lives right now, but I can easily name for you the people who are doing that. Like, they stand out, the people who are really seeing us, really treating us with dignity, really caring deeply for Selah and for her care. So, and that can be the person cleaning the bathroom, and that can be the nephrologist. You don't have to be a kidney doctor to be the one really seeing me. Like, that can go anywhere. So.
Wow. I'm struck also by the fact that you have a significant community around you, and what a gift that is. And I often wonder how people survive this life if they don't have a community. It's just that even in the best of times, if you don't have a community, you don't have people to celebrate with. And certainly during the last 2 years of the pandemic, a lot of the fatigue that people have experienced, I think, has come from, I just don't have this stuff that I'm used to having that keeps me alive. And have this sense that God set this enormous table for you with many places around it, bringing people in. And that God knew there needed to be a lot of different places at this table. And you know, how you do it otherwise, I don't know.
I don't either. And, you know, I think what you might be tempted to say is like, wow, that's really cool that Ashley has a lot of friends, you know, but the reality is like, we've been working hard on that for years. And so I just like the invitation is out there to other people that like, and this is what we've been learning as we build a community for our family and especially for Coralie, is that there is giftedness all around you. It's all around you. And like, you know, we went to the orchard one day and we saw, if you ever go to an orchard, you see all the apples that are on the ground just sitting there. And like nothing really gets done with them. Like they just kind of sit there and then they rot. And like I look in my neighborhood and like there's giftedness all around us. There's connection available for all of us. We just have to like open space, create space for that connection to happen. And then someday you might need those people at that table, or you might be the person at the table for someone else's wilderness. And like, we talk about a lot with Selah that she has necessary suffering. There are things that she has to do, like dialysis. But then she has unnecessary suffering. She has things like she doesn't need to be cold. Like we can make sure that she's warm. That's unnecessary suffering. And like living a life without community, like it's just unnecessary. Like there's so much community out there and so many people wanting connection that like, go for it.
Go for it.
It's out there. Yeah.
Well, Ashley, I have found this very moving and sustaining for me. I've just noticed the transition from your describing the situation that developed. And as I said, I was just exhausted thinking about it. And yet, without minimizing that, you know, what you've identified is the ways this table has been set for you and people brought to you, and all with a God who's paying some attention. But I think also that your mention of how important it is to be authentic all the way along with your spouse, with others, not sugarcoat, not pretend.
And with yourself,
everything is just fine. You know, that's
live, love, laugh.
Right.
Yeah. It pays off in dividends, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any final word for us before we let you go?
No, just keep praying for Selah. And we just are so grateful to be a part of the St. Timothy community and to be surrounded by people who are living authentically with themselves, with God, and with their community.
Well, we're certainly grateful that you guys are part of this journey. And as I tell you every so often, I know at least one person who will be begging God for you. And I guess I'd want to close out this session by just, reaffirming your invitation to those listening that prayer matters. It just matters. I don't know how it matters. I don't have any great theory about it.
Me either.
But the fact is that, we don't know how those prayers have affected the ways that people have shown up at your table.
Absolutely.
And I give thanks for that. So you will be in our prayers, and we love you. We are inspired by you and your little crew. And
I can't wait to bring her there.
And I was going to say, I can't wait until Selah makes her debut. That will be a day for much rejoicing. Well, listen, give our best to your crew, and we'll see you down the road.
Okay.
Love
Thank
you.
you. Love you too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.